Hey there folks, Finley here. So this is just a really short video on examples of realism. These are all plays that you're going to be looking at in Drama 2, and they're all super important plays that you ought to know. So this is just a quick video to go over the sources of them. So the first example of realism, these are all realistic plays, is of course the first realistic play. You remember this from Drama 1, and that is A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. The Doll's House, again, about a marriage falling apart, really, but it's useful to know because it was the first realistic play. Ibsen was the guy who took the hyper-realistic sets and costumes of naturalism at the end of the 1800s and combined it with classical Greek structure, rising action, point of transformation, climax, falling action, to make realism, right? That's what realism is. Naturalistic, believable sets, costumes, acting, tied with classical Greek structure. That's realism. The first realistic play was Ibsen's Doll's House. Ibsen invented that. And then the other plays we're looking at are all examples of American realism. America really sort of took this idea of realism, and a lot of the really famous realistic plays have been American. So, The Glass Menagerie, maybe the most famous American play by Tennessee Williams. That's a pen name. His mother did not name him Tennessee. That would be weird. But Tennessee Williams writes The Glass Menagerie. Again, it's about a son leaving his family, leaving his mother, leaving his somewhat disabled sister in order to have a life of his own, and sort of the heartache that is experienced with that. The name, The Glass Menagerie, comes from the little collection of glass animals that the disabled sister collects. So that's one of the most famous American plays. Another one of the most famous American plays is All My Sons by Arthur Miller, which we're doing now in the 2016 season here. It's a tragedy, right? It's structured as a tragedy. But it's a tragedy of the American dream. What will someone do to get the American dream, and what are the consequences of that? So in this play, a man decides in order to secure prosperity for his family, he makes a bad business decision, sends out some parts for airplanes that causes airplanes to crash during World War II, and then there are consequences to that moving forward. So All My Sons by Arthur Miller, who along with Tennessee Williams is maybe the most famous of the American writers. The last play to mention about realism is not pure realism. It actually has elements of theatricalism in it, in that there are no sets, there are no props, it's all sort of mimed. But in terms of the content of it, it's very, very realistic. And that's a play called Our Town by Thornton Wilder. And Our Town deals with daily life in a small town in America. The first act is just daily life, the second act is love and marriage, and the third act is death, and this idea of sort of looking back on life. It's not pure realism. It's actually closer to theatricalism, because we have the character of the stage manager who narrates things, but it's one of the plays that we'll be looking at and taking scenes from as we explore these plays. So it's one of the ones I wanted to make mention of. It is another super famous play written by an American author. So those are the four plays that you should really know when you think of realism and American realism. The Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen, he was Norwegian. The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. All My Sons by Arthur Miller. And Our Town by Thornton Wilder.